So, just for the simplicity of the book and stuff, what's your background in spiritualism? You already told me in previous times.
Yeah.
For the book, what's your background in spiritualism?
Well, I grew up with pretty traditional pagan community stuff, and then I've kind of spent a lot of my time studying like hoodoo and voodoo and Santeria, and then a lot of folk magic. And that's pretty much where I also study like more traditional like Kabbalah stuff, you know, too. Like I really just try to be involved in as many different kinds as I can. Like I'm very into it.
Like ceremonial magic.
Ceremonial magic for sure is a big one. Ritualistic magic's a big one. Herbalism, totem stuff. Like I'm about it.
Nice. And so what about your background in tarot for the sake of the book?
I was a professional tarot card reader for a really long time. I grew up learning the tarot. I've studied it most of my life. And like I said, I did do that for a living for like 10 years, and it's great. I love tarot reading.
Awesome. So you are very qualified.
I am a reliable source of information for that stuff.
Awesome. Because I'm still new, I'm still a baby, learning about all that kind of stuff. So it's excellent. You were the first person that came to my mind for this.
Oh, I'm so flattered. Kelsey's gonna be down. I'm usually down to talk about witchcraft stuff. It's all good.
All right. So what were some points, if any, that seemed inaccurate that you wanted to address?
Honestly, I didn't see anything super inaccurate. I saw a lot of stuff that maybe seemed that I could use more detail.
Okay.
Or more of a explanation specifically of like why are you trying to use that.
Right.
Like, and that's really it. Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong or incorrect about anything in the book, but I think some background information for like sources could be helpful.
Okay.
Like, I don't know what kind of sources you are using for the book, if you have any other, or if you're just going straight up with what your own personal knowledge is, but getting some sources could be really helpful. Like, but other than that, I think it's like a very personal interpretation, which is just fine. And I think it is very accurate and comes from a well-informed place. But definitely, like, I think if you could pull from some specific, or maybe cite more about the history of tarot, I think, and build it up from that and be like, why can you have so many interpretations of it if this is where it came from?
Okay.
I think that too. 'Cause a lot of people are like, well, there's a tarot deck, and like, well, this is different, but like, what I think if you could separate what the original tarot was and how that's used, and then kind of, and once you have that, you can really impose upon, you can really impose how you do it on there, and I think that can help make people bridge the gap. Okay. I mean, you have to remember too, most people who are reading your book probably are already familiar with tarot a lot, but I still think it's just like a good way to simplify your idea, to kind of bring it all back into a loop, be like, so this is where it comes from, and then this is why and this is what I do, and this is why I interpret it this way. Just a little filler.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a good plan.
Good feedback.
Good feedback.
Any interpretations that you thought were particularly like, ooh, that stuck out?
I just love the dinosaur animism stuff. It's so great because like why not? Because why not? Like this, I mean, it's just not traditional animal stuff. I mean, because like I've honestly never even heard someone bring that up in my life. I'm like, that is like so peak millennial shit. I love it so much because like what I mean, all this stuff is there. Yeah. All this stuff is there. I mean, all the animals are there, you know, and like also because none of them exist anymore, it kind of does add to their like. What? I know, and it's cool, and it's just like the whole time I was there, like, oh my god, I've never thought of that. But then here's the thing though, because of that, it really made me think much wider about, and I like this about hoodoo too, and like folk magic specifically, is that it does take in a lot of modern stuff into its practice. You know, you'll see people using things like Coke bottles, or like, you know, or I like to use those like quarters that came out that have the house and the wheat and stuff on them. Like, it's not so much that the stuff has to be ancient or has to be, I feel like a lot of witchcraft is very aesthetics heavy, and it has to be like this certain stuff, or it's not cool. It's like, no, it's science, and here's the thing: it's like science is such a big thing, and I feel like of course, like there's like traditional witchcraft and folk magic and religion and spiritualism, and then there's like the metaphysical stuff, which is like the more of the science leaning kind of stuff. And I think you're doing the dinosaur ad is just such a great midpoint for those things that it could kind of attract both crowds. It's like someone who might not do tarot cards would be like, well, I'm not going to do tarot cards, but I feel like dinosaur tarot cards, though they probably want to try it. I mean, it's honestly such a cool, fresh take on it. Like, I think it's very neat.
Awesome.
And like, just, especially someone who really likes science. I mean, I do a lot of science in my art, and like, I'm not a science denier of any kind, but I mean, people have a hard time with the witchcraft stuff because they think it conflicts it. And even with traditional religion, there's always a conflict between science and religion, and they really shouldn't be. There's no reason for it. Like, one doesn't necessarily disprove the other, I don't think. If anything, they can kind of enhance each other's, existence.
Exactly.
But I just think that approach to it with the dinosaurs is just so spot on. Like, it's like such a in-your-face, like, obvious thing. It's great.
Well, I mean, when I first started thinking about it, and this is one of the questions I wrote down, I'm kind of like...
Oh, you're good. We're chilling.
With the questions. Any thoughts on the theory/perspective/possible theology between spirits older than humanity and humanity's deities? There is
a lot of thought. You know what's funny? Every time I think of that question, I always think about American Gods, because
I've been watching that show. Oh, I love it.
It's so good. The book is amazing too. I really recommend you read the book. The show is also great. But like, as far as the American Gods thing, because like none of that stuff could exist unless humanity thought of it first. I'm not necessarily in that school of thought. I could believe that there was proto-life forms or deities or entities or something outside of what we currently are that maybe we did interact with at some point, or that there is some memory of them somehow. And like, I'm more on that end of it. I don't necessarily think that we as human beings necessarily created all of the gods.
Right.
And I think a lot of what we do consider gods or deities might just be a primitive interpretation of something that was going on, but I don't necessarily buy into that either. There's so much uniformity. Like, I mean, there's so much like, there's so much consistent things throughout every culture in the world, and I just don't believe in coincidence like that. It's like...
When it's that much.
When it's that much. I mean, I think when so many people just feel like something is true, there's got to be something to it. Like... I definitely am open to all the interpretations on it, like whatever, I've heard people think, well, that's just aliens from another culture, or, that's like another type of humanity that existed. And some people are like, well, those were like the angels, or all of them are great. They're all great, and I'm a big fan of all of them.
I love
They're just fun. They're fun.
Love all the theories.
It's very like fun and philosophical to talk about, and like I think open for a lot of interpretation, or it should be, should be open for a lot of interpretation. And sometimes it's not.
Because, like, my kind of perspective at this point, knowing what I know and knowing I don't know a lot of stuff, is potentially the deities and humanity, corporeal plane, existed and came to being around the same time.
Yes, I like that idea.
Long-distance telephone.
No, I don't disagree with that necessarily. Like, I think that's actually probably more likely. That they all probably do, especially if you go subscribe to the Big Bang Theory. Like, eventually that stuff probably all did come around at the same time, but there's so much of our history we can't account for, even like as far as humanity is concerned. We only really know like the last few thousand years with any like certainty at all, and even that's like kind of kind of in the air for some stuff, so I just think discounting that isn't necessarily the way to go. But I think the thing that your book would kind of do though is it's not so much this is a system and this should be like this. I really think it's about making people think about it in a different way. Like, the dinosaur animism is cool, but really I think it should just make you think more broadly about your witchcraft. Why not include things like technology and science? Like, yes, it is largely about nature, but everything interacts with nature, and nature is a much broader thing than just the trees and the it could be I actually have a friend, I'll see if I can get you in touch with him, he's kind of a weirdo, but he actually uses, like, in his practice, he has, like, germ and fungal and viral deities, which I'm like, that's wild. I was like,
evolution of deity.
Yeah, I got an evolution of deity, or, like, what is considered sacred, and, like, and a lot of the things that, and I hate to fucking keep bringing up American Gods, but like how they have one that's like technology and media and, drugs. Like, there's things that matter to people more as time goes on. I think not acknowledging that and how they affect people, and like, especially when new stuff comes to light, like dinosaurs did, why not include that in your practice?
Right.
There's no reason for it other than like staunch traditionalists. But here's the thing with the witchcraft stuff though, especially like the Wicca stuff, it's like, people want to act like it's all based off ancient traditions and stuff, and the reality is that it's just not. It's just not. Like, at best, that is something Gerald Gardner kind of pulled out of his ass after talking to Aleister Crowley, which he largely pulled that shit out of his ass. You know, and it might be very, very loosely based on like some real esoteric stuff that might have been happening, but basically most of the stuff that we consider modern day spiritualism gets most of its ideas from like the Victorian and spiritualist revival movement, and how they would interpret it based on like Hermeticism, which is basically like pre-science and pre-chemistry, and like, you know, you have the alchemy crowd and stuff. So most of that comes from like balance, and all that stuff comes from Roman philosophy of like how the universe is balanced and stuff. That's really where 90% of all this shit comes from, you know, and you can trace it back. I mean, it's not hard. Like, you know, no one, he's like, oh, well, this is an ancient Celt. No, it's not. The Celts didn't have a written language for forever. There's no way that those books were saved, especially the Avatar. You're not going to come tell me this is an ancient Celtic witchcraft practice. Right. It's just not. It's just not, and I'm sorry. I wish we did have fucking grimoires and, you know, traditional religious shit that was passed on from these cultures. There just isn't. Christianity erased most of it, or got reinterpreted. Even with the Viking gods, we don't actually know that that's what they are. We don't fucking know. Like, most of everything we know about Viking mythology comes from the Eddas, or what is it, the Eddas? I could be tripping about that book name, but it comes from like one or two sources that were both Christian monks who rewrote the sources. So we have no fucking clue how accurate that is. I mean, we're basing a whole on basically two sources. That's it. That's all we got, you know? So we're like, this is what it is. It's like, it just isn't. It just isn't. So, I mean, I think letting other stuff into the system and creating your own systems is just as good a way to go. Like, and I think you can still have equally valid results and things with that. But I really think yours is more of like a thought piece of like how differently you can think about it, and like
it's an exploration.
Yeah, it's an exploration, and I think at some point you maybe should do a book on like developing your own systems. I thought about that too for a long time, because
I'd love to read a book.
Everyone's such a staunch like traditionalist as far as like it has to be this, and you have to close the corners, and you have to cast a circle and do all this shit.
I ain't never cast a circle.
I ain't never cast a fucking circle either, bro. Like, I'm not. I mean, I might cleanse the room or whatever. I mean, I've definitely mopped the floor with some Florida water. You know, I've definitely burned some smoke in a bitch, but I've never been like, okay, I gotta call down the guardians of the watchtowers of the east or whatever. I mean, I did that shit when I was a kid because I grew up with Wicca and stuff, but I just, you know, that's not for everybody. And I just don't think that, I don't have the time. I don't got the patience. It all seems a little too put together for me, you know, and that doesn't work for me, and that's why that's why I'm a big fan of like kind of doing the research about everything and then creating your own system, because honestly that's probably the way it should be. I mean, I think that there is a place for the big group dynamics and stuff, and the same with any religion or any practice really. Some people need the group shit. They need the big traditions and rituals, and some people are just like going through their own struggle, and they just need to be able to go do that without all the restrictions. But I mean, that's the thing though, it doesn't have to be so restrictive, and I just think the way that this is thought about is so fun.
I mean, I didn't have a basis in religion or anything really when I was growing up. I was homeschooled, so I don't have any Christian or Catholic inbound stuff, so I'm just whatever this is and pulling from a whole bunch of different places.
I mean, and just like, for me, I definitely learned a lot studying mythology, and not just like from a media standpoint, but like very academically, like, you know, finding the source literature that you can and reading it and like actually interpreting those texts. Like, hey, if you're going to study Egyptian or Viking or whatever mythology you're going to base your spiel, really look into where that shit comes from. You would be pretty fucking surprised a lot of the time, like how, you know, that's not like an ancient book somebody passed down. That's like some monk somewhere writing his very biased interpretation of like what he maybe talked to in a language he doesn't understand. You know, it's just crazy. And, you know, and that can be hard to reconcile with. I mean, even with Christianity, they've rewritten that Bible like, what, 9 or 12 times or some shit. Like, you know, at least, you know, it's like, and that shit changes a lot, you know, and so it's like, that's why I like to read like the Dead Sea Scroll stuff or the Apocrypha stuff that wasn't included in the Bible, just give you a fuller perspective on it. And you should do that with everything, but you know, who's got the time for that shit? Me, I have the time for that shit, but you know, I have no life, so of course I have time for that shit, but no, most people don't.
The context culturally of what was going on and why they were doing those things.
I think that there's definitely a culture nowadays of people don't want to look for where that shit comes from. Like, they definitely want to, like, you know, if they hear it and it sounds good to them and they think that sounds about true, they're just gonna go with it regardless. You know, they're not gonna be like, well, who said that was true? And then be able to find out who said that was true, and then find out who they heard that shit. Most people don't even begin to know how to start tracking that information. Like, it's just crazy. There's some really good channels on YouTube that are great for that. There's one that's specifically called Overly Sarcastic Productions that like
that one.
really gets into that shit all the time, and I love it, bro. They did one on Orphic Dionysus that was like, I loved it. I loved it so much. It was so cool. But I mean, that's all valid shit to talk about with, especially modern paganism and like occult spirituality stuff, is like, most of that stuff basically didn't exist openly at all until like the Victorian era. Most of it. I mean, there's going to be cults of stuff here and there, but that shit's largely was gone for a long time. People just kind of brought it back out of sheer willpower to like fill a gap, I think. But, you know, if that's the case, then I would say go fucking nuts with it. You know, and there's definitely, like, traditional religious stuff that has existed for a long time. And especially if you get into, like even with, like, you know, the African-based religions, like, a lot of that stuff even is, like, filtered through so many filters before it gets to anything you could understand. Right. And, like, some of that shit probably has existed for thousands of years relatively uninterrupted. But just because it's in some book you bought at Barnes & Noble doesn't mean it's accurate or true. You know, and that's a hard thing to learn too. And like every group you're into is going to believe in different shit. It's just, so I think once you get to the point, especially in the internet age, there are no secrets anymore. There's no occult anymore. It's not, you know, a dark knowledge you have to be brought into. It's like, no, any asshole with a Wikipedia page can go look that shit up and find out all that shit within reason. But here's the deal. There's no, I personally don't think that if you were able to go find that information, go ahead and use it. I was like, well, you can't use gods that aren't, you know, you're connected to. I'm like, try and stop people. Fine, I'm not a fan of closed practices. I don't think that benefits anybody, especially the cultures that participate in them, quite frankly. And like, and of course that's me, I'm a white chick, so of course I'm going to say that. And especially as a white chick who has been initiated in a closed practice. Like, and here's the thing is, it's like, you know, you can do that, and I think that closed practices are more of a problem with like crafts and arts and literature and language, because eventually those practices will die. Right. Closed practices will die. There is no, yeah, they will go extinct. They will, because eventually the people in that culture have no interest in partaking in it for whatever reason, and then they just die. That's why most of our pagan beliefs don't exist now. That's why they don't exist for thousands of years, because they were closed cults. And then when they were disrupted by various things, they would just vanish into the ether. So you kind of have to decide as a cult if that's what you want to do. Right. And you can do that, and that's fine. But then, you know, when a big wave of right-wing Christianity rolls through or something, then you're gone. And all your literature's gone, and all your practices are gone, and you have nothing left. And that's why there is a gap in paganism. That's why there is, like, well, these are the beliefs we did for, because the shit's gone now, because it was a closed practice, and so we lost our whole culture because of it. So I'm not for it personally.
I hadn't thought of it that way in terms of like almost like a racial segregation.
Yeah, it is.
That will die off if you separate for that long.
Yeah, it will. It will, and it does. And then you as a culture kind of have to decide if that's what you want, and that's okay if that's what you want. But then eventually, then be prepared, because like, you know, that, and you see that a lot, especially with like European paganisms. Most people can't even name any European folk deities, other than like the Viking ones, which are probably not super accurate. Most people, if that's, Ostara is not even a thing, bro.
It's actually real.
It's like, you know, and then there's like, most people couldn't sit there and name you, I mean, they might be able to name a couple, but most people don't have a whole deep understanding of like Russian folklore, or like Irish folklore, or German folklore, God. They all did at one point, but, you know, they were considered closed practices, you know, only people who were doing that. And here's the thing, they don't start off that way. Not just the religion at one point. And then as another oppressive regime or other religion comes in, they kind of have to be secretive. And then that's why it becomes closed a lot of the time. And then eventually it just gets wiped out. So once you get to the point where it goes from religion to closed practice, you're at a real dangerous point, I think, in your development as a spirituality. And like, yeah, there's definitely things that aren't for everybody, but I just feel like if you're going to develop a system, do it for you, you know, make that a thing. But if you're going to develop like, you know, a whole system for everybody, then it's got to be for everybody. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it just won't exist. Like,
yeah, that's a fair perspective. I like that.
And here's the thing is, a lot of people will hate on me for saying that.
I'm sure.
But I'm like, you could prove it. I mean, where are all these cults that were... Look at history, like, and like, yeah, a lot of people don't want people practicing those religions, or like don't want people doing those crafts because of their race or their gender or whatever the fuck. And that's cool, that's valid, I get that, but you know, but there, at this point in society, you really can't stop people from looking at that thing or doing that thing. And that kind of sucks. And they'll be like, well, my gods will get you for doing that shit because you're not. And then maybe they will. But, you know, the reality is what's going to happen is there's going to be like multiple spun out cults of these things that come from different places of education. You know, it's like there's going to be people who just practice voodoo because they learned it on the internet. There are going to be people who are initiated. There's going to be people who only heard about it from a family member or friend, and like family cults have their own rules, you know, so it's just, and that's what, like with any witchcraft practice, some people are like, we only use these books and do these practices and do these things. Other people are just making it up as they go. Other people have loose family traditions, you know, it's just, there's really no lid on it anymore, like, you know.
And then like practicing out of necessity.
Yeah, absolutely out of necessity. I mean, people need to fill a spiritual gap a lot of the time or feel like they have some kind of control over their lives. And that's why I feel like with witchcraft religions in particular, it has more of an appeal to people who are feeling hopeless and out of control. They can, at that point, kind of take control in some way, even if it's just psychosomatically through a ritualistic practice. It calls to a lot of people, especially nowadays, especially because it's not as restrictive culturally. You know, most pagan religions, although you will see there's a pretty strict divide in that, but most pagan religions, at least modern day ones here in America, don't give a shit about, you know, gender identity or, you know, your race or your poverty level. And I have run into paganisms that are very anti-trans and things like that because it's male and female are extremely serious dichotomies in paganism. In most forms of paganism, not in all of them. A lot of them have, you know, gender neutral ones and things like that. But in some most traditional paganism things, the dichotomy of male and female is critical. It's essential to the whole thing that works. So if you were in denial of one of those things, you were out of balance of one of those things, and it becomes a spiritual issue at that point. And like, so there are some groups that take a hard stance on that, and other ones are like, it's cool, whatever works, you know, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I've seen is the male and female, they work because when they are unified, they become a whole. So
yeah.
I would think that trans in one way or another is like an example.
You would think, but it's not in a lot of places. In a lot of places, it's like you were fucking up your role that you were given by nature. And it's the same argument that Christianity essentially makes, like, this is your nature, and then to defy your nature so openly. And mostly that becomes from a place of, do you believe in fluidity or not?
Right.
And like, a lot of people don't. And that's something that most people, I think, would be shocked to run into, especially in like the Wicca community and stuff. Because it has been long-term, has been very supportive of like the LGBT scene and all that. But I've been very surprised when talking with a lot of pagans that I know that they are very they don't think that shit's cool. You know, they think that's very in conflict with their beliefs, which I thought was very surprising.
Yeah, that is surprising.
But I've also run into that where that is the case more often than not with people I've talked to, which I thought was crazy. I was like, I really didn't expect that at all. But apparently, yeah. So that's something maybe you should think about too. Sometimes it's like, I wouldn't have thought about that. Like, I understand the logic behind it and like why they might take issue with it, but my whole thing is, who fucking cares, really? Like, does it really matter? Like, I mean, I know especially in like ritualistic magic shit, it's like very like, no, you have to be a chick to do this, a biological chick to do this. Like, and that's more in the crowd where I think it's an issue where it does matter. Like, I don't need, it's like, and like I definitely talked to somebody who's like doing a fertility ritual, and they wanted it to be performed by an actual, you know, like not actual, you know, a biological woman, you know, and then somebody on there like, no, like, you're not the right energy, spiritually or otherwise, because you are not a biological woman. I'm like, this is so interesting to me, like, to see that in this scene. Because, like, on one hand, like I said, I can see it, I get it, like, I understand logically why that occurs, but it is also just interesting to see.
Right. I mean, they're definitely, I've met people who are one or another and embody the feminine or the masculine opposite so much more than their counterpart.
Yo, for sure.
Like, I would pick you.
I'm more of a, I take that shit on an individual basis.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
It's like, if I'm looking for a feminine energy, I'm looking for the most feminine
It's
energy.
weird because, like, I feel like even as a chick, I don't have a particularly feminine energy. Like, honestly, like, I feel like some of the dudes I hang out with have way more feminine energies than I do.
Right?
And, like, some people, but again, it just depends on your tribe, bro. It depends on your little cult you're in, like, how you deal with that. I say cult, but I mean the cult in, like, the literal sense, like, you know, micro-religious group or whatever, but it is interesting to see, though, because you'd think with, like, the advent of, especially because paganism is largely such, like, a leftist thing a lot of the time. Yeah. There's a shift in that, though, nowadays. I've noticed that, like, since, like, Trump got elected, there is, like, a lot of right-wing pagans, like, a lot, like, there's a lot of them. It's crazy. They mostly do like Viking or Germanic spirituality shit, and that's like, but I don't know, bro. I've seen a lot of them. I've seen a lot of them coming up lately. It's like very weird for me to see, but I've seen it a lot. I've seen it like the SCA and like pagan events, and like you see them, they're sneaky, but they're there, and I'm like, that is a trip to me. Like it is. It's very infiltrated, but as a community, we're gonna have to decide how we adjust to that. Because, I mean, ultimately, because our community largely takes like, well, who the fuck are we to tell people, you know, what they, but eventually it's going to come to that point when...
You better have a good damn reason.
Yeah, because there's nothing in our religion expressly forbidding that, but, you know, it's kind of fucked up societally, so then that's a thing you got to address, too. And it's just interesting to see how all this shit changes over time. Because 10 years ago, I never would have thought that shit would have popped up at an event. And then I was like I was at this, like, what was it? Was it equinox or no, it was a solstice, was it the springs? I was like a few weeks ago, I was at a full moon ritual thing, and these guys are all like, you know, the Viking spirituality, heathen kind of dudes, and they're cool and all, but like if you sat there with them long enough, you'd be like, oh, it's very much, you know, traditional gender roles and anti-gay and trans shit. And here's the thing, though, is that a lot of pagan religions do kind of push that shit, though, especially with the traditional feminine and masculine roles, especially things like Wicca will do that. Because, you know, they're like, well, you should be in your divine feminine. You should be in this fucking specific gender role-filled place. And, like, but here's the thing, though, that's just like, that's where it starts, and then it's like, well, then we should have traditional family dynamics, and it goes from there, bro. It goes from there, and like, I've been seeing it a lot more openly in these crowds. I know, it is weird. It's totally throwing me for a loop a little bit, because I'm like, huh, interesting. That's not what I would have anticipated the direction this crowd was making, but I've been seeing it, bro. It's crazy how many pagans are out there supporting Trump, like but it's a thing, bro. It's a thing. It's crazy, but that's just technology. Yeah. That's just the internet bringing very specific. Yeah, it's accessible to everyone, and it's like, so then what's the alternative? It's like, well, you start a coven, you know, you do your own shit, and you don't go do the big events. But here's the deal: is like those guys come together. They always find each other, especially with the internet. You can't stop that shit. No. You can't, and so it's really about how do you. Yeah, it's like on one hand it's accessible to everybody, but on the other it's accessible to everybody. But here's the thing, though, it kind of has to be. It kind of has to be. And only you as your individual group can really, decide how you deal with that and the choices that you follow. Which is why I think a lot of people are going to turn to making their own systems to kind of avoid these things. Because in any group large enough, you're going to have like a couple white supremacists and shit. Like, you know. I mean, I've seen it on the other end, too. People just be hating each other nowadays. It's very exclusionary and passive-aggressive, and, like, it just kind of sucks. Yeah. Like, it shouldn't be. It should be fun. Like, I really want to go to Beltane this year, but I'm also like, oh, it'd be so fun, but I'm also like, well, we'll see how it goes, because everyone just gets so uppity and butthurt about every fucking little thing nowadays. I'm like, geez, because like, well, my internet interpretation of this specific thing says this. It's like, dude, we're all here to just drink wine with our titties out in the fucking woods. Like, why are you making this hard? Like,
if you do decide to do Beltane, I would love
I'm trying to get my money together to go get a ticket, because only like $40, but they have like limited slots. But I'm like, they hardly ever sell out of them. It's like, but they're cool.
Because
I would love to go.
I tried to get into one of those before, and I went to the online application, and it was like, you know, have you taken a COVID test because we're going to be sharing foods? I'm like,
so nowadays, nowadays they're not. I think this year's the first year they're actually getting rid of that, and so that should be cool, because I know they do Beltane. That's coming up real fucking soon. It's coming up like the end of this month. And if I get the money together, I'll get tickets. But I'll let you know, because like that'd be cool to go, because it's super fun. Like, I haven't gone in years. I went to Mabon this last year. They also do a winter solstice thing here that's pretty big, and they also do a Yule Ball thing and a Samhain thing. Like, you know, they do a lot of stuff. There's always stuff going on. You know, it's just really about finding the people that are in the right crowd for you. But here's the deal: if you go to the big ones, you'll find those people. Right. Everyone's got their own little cliques and shit, but everybody finds each other. And it's just different and fun. And like, for the most part, no one's gonna be like, oh, well, you can't do that. You know, unless you're like a white person doing not traditionally white stuff, then you're going to hear some shit. But other than that, you're going to be fine. Like, you know, everyone's just going to have a good time.
Yeah, I'm really just looking for an excuse to hang out with people who are like...
Oh, Pagan Pride Day is coming. Oh, yeah, and that's totally what Mabon and Beltane are for. Like, that's the bomb. Like, Beltane is so cool, because, like, one we have here in New Mexico is one of the biggest ones in the world. Like, it's crazy big. But they have a maypole, and it's like a telephone pole. It's like huge. And like, they do the ribbons, they do a big fucking like 50 people maypole dance. It's wild. Yeah, it's super fun. I haven't gone since I was a kid. Well, that's not true. I went when I was an adult last time. It was awful because we got snowed on like fuck. Like, like bad.
That's the New Mexico's second winter.
Oh, we got dropped like 2 feet of snow on us. Oh my God. And I hadn't gone since then. I was like, I don't know.
I can't financially recover from that.
Right. It's like, well, we got left up there with no ride. Our ride ditched us with all the tents and everything, bro. He got in some tiff with his girlfriend or some shit. Like, so we ended up having to like call somebody to come get us, pack up all these tents. It was a nightmare, bro. I was like, I'm never doing this shit again. Like, but I'm like, I kind of want to do it now. With like less shitty people, like honestly, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. If you end up doing it, like,
I will let you know. Like, because are you on the event pages for that stuff?
No, I uninstalled Facebook because it was on my last nerve.
That's fair, and I also wish I could do that, but I can't. It's like fucking awful. Ugh, I hate social media. I hate it so much. I really
only do Instagram because I can post pictures.
Oh, literally, that's like the only reason I have my Instagram at all. It's like that's the only place I'm keeping my portfolio together. And like I have TikTok, but I'm like, it takes up so much of my fucking. I just waste so much time on it, bro. It's like awful. I hate that shit.
So okay, real quick, back to the questions list. Since I am pretty new to it, I thought this would be good for the book. Any advice for communicating with spirits / deities?
My only advice I can really give people is like, be confident about what you're doing and be humble about that shit. Every deity is different. Every deity wants different stuff, but I think generally if you go into a place where you're coming at it from a place that is humble and appreciative and like serious about what you're asking, even if it's not like super, it'll be like you have to all fucking prostrate yourself, but you know, do it with intention, I think is the best way. For me personally, like I'm not gonna bother a spirit over a bunch of trivial bullshit most of the time. Like I will, the other thing I think too is just approach it like any relationship. You know, don't just be asking them for shit out of the blue unless you're gonna give them, you know, unless you've been supporting them. Like, why would someone come help you if you weren't like leaving them, you know, especially from a deity, like leave them some offerings, acknowledge their presence, you know, do something. It's like daily, and then because like why otherwise when you call upon them, why the fuck should they help you? Like, so I think a lot of humility is really necessary. Clear intentions about what it is you're trying to communicate and what you want. I'd say really think about it before you talk to a deity or attempt to communicate with one. Like, just be thoughtful about it. You know, because I'm not saying like every time you try and communicate with a deity, it has to be like this whole big ass thing. But really think of it as like, that's why having an altar I think is important, because then it kind of gives you a place to focus like every day. Like, okay, I'm going to leave this offering. I'm going to acknowledge and thank this deity for stuff. And then when the times come where you do, you have a nice focused way to do it. Eventually you can get to the point where you can just kind of undertake that in your everyday life. But yeah, humility and intention. Just, you know, that's it.
Awesome. We're pretty much wrapped because I was expecting there to be more points about the tarot readings that you would be like, oh, you missed this.
No, honestly, no. So I thought your readings were... No, I honestly thought they were fine. Okay. Like, I went through them pretty detailed. I even double checked them and I was like, they're fine. Like, there's nothing I would really... be like, oh, well, no one's like, oh, well, that doesn't mean that. That's not something you're gonna have to worry about. Okay. Like, I think mostly the strength of your book is going to come from this like alternative way of thinking about readings and the kind of deities you work with and things like that. Like the tarot reading stuff is just a way to do that. Right. And I honestly think that's not even really the focus of your book, honestly. It's not even really the focus. It's just like a method you can use to do that. Yeah. And here's how you do it. Here's a good way to start doing that as far as using the tarot to communicate with spiritual stuff. Right. And that's something most people don't use the tarot for. Really? It's not something most people use tarot cards for. Most people use tarot cards very specifically for divination, for inner self work. I have not met, nor do I know personally many people who have used that specifically for spiritual communication, other than to get insight on but using it like, but not really like, oh, I'm specifically asking this deity to talk to me through these cards. That's not something I've seen done a lot. Oh. Yeah, it's actually
almost explicitly what I use.
which is cool. But I think that specifically is actually something that you're not going to see in most tarot card. Actually, I personally never seen that in a tarot card book. Not ever. Well, and here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's actually a completely valid way to do it, because they do have ways that you can ask yes or no questions, how to interpret those. But doing that specifically as a way to communicate to a spiritual entity, I've never seen it. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not done. I'm sure it is. Somebody does it, but I've never seen it in a book. Okay. It's not something I've done personally. When I do it, it's like, I guess I do assume that when I'm doing the tarot, there is some sort of entity there. But I almost think of the tarot deck itself as it's got its own thing going on. Like, it's weird. Like,
they're their own thing.
Yeah, they're their own thing. They have their own thing, and it's just like, and it's weird because, like, although that idea seems so obvious, I've just never seen it done like that. And like,
it's so clear.
It's so clear, and like, honestly, that's kind of genius, because for me, I mostly use them as, like, for me, when I mostly only do readings for myself anymore. And so when I do readings for myself, I kind of use it as a way to think about what is actually bothering me. Right. Like, what is it I actually need to prioritize? What is it I actually need to think about? Where am I at this journey at this point? And I don't really necessarily feel like it's a deity telling me that, or a spirit. It's mostly like the cards helping me sort my own energy out. I really think of them more as a very in tune tool. And I know that you can use them that way. But for me, when I'm doing that, I'll probably use other tools. Okay. But I think using the tarot that way is a way that most people who are really into tarot probably have never thought about using it very specifically that way. Like, especially people who are new to deity work and new to paganism and like need something more direct to kind of help them build up that relationship. They can't take a lot of it on, vibes. Like, they need like some interaction. I think that's a great way to breach that. Okay. And then I think it will help you build up an actual relationship with your deity if you feel like you have a more solid medium to communicate with them at. And I think that's a super good tool and method for that kind, because like, that's the thing, is you have to build up that relationship like psychologically with your deity. And that can be so fucking hard to do, because it's not like you could sit down and necessarily just like talk to them at that point. It's not like, it's mostly like a feeling or a set of, but I think having the deck there, it's something that you can understand and interpret, and the universe can kind of get through and interpret. I think it's a really kind of spot on idea, and I think would be a great way to get people thinking differently about how they communicate with their spirits. It's not all, you have to light a candle, need this specific offering. It's not necessarily that. I think it's building a more real relationship with it, in the way that like prayer might for some people. It's like a small daily interactive thing you could do that will realistically build that relationship up for you. And I think that's fucking great. Like, that's a super cool and interesting way to think about it that most people I don't think would. And I think would be an aha moment for a lot of tarot readers as well, especially ones that are struggling with strict spirituality or working with narrow deities, like, who aren't doing the big, broad interpretation paganism thing. Like, I think it would be very helpful for a lot of people. So I think maybe in your book too, maybe putting in something more about developing relationships with your deities and like really breaking down how this helps you do that. Okay. And it's because like, there's a million fucking books on how to read the tarot. And there's a lot of ones that are going to be definitely better than yours even. Like, there's going to be a lot of like, any asshole can learn how to read the tarot. Really what I think your book can do is help people use it in a way they wouldn't have expected. Okay. Like, do it, like build up a tarot on your own, and using things like using the dinosaur is great. Because it's like, it doesn't have to be dinosaurs. It could be anything you fucking want. Anything that you could connect to spiritually. Now, granted, there's some people who are going to do that, make like, start worshiping Cartman from South Park and use their deck to do that. And like, there's some people who are going to be like, cool. Some people are going to go way out of left field with that. And whatever works for them, you just got to let that happen. But I think the thing that's important about your book is that it's going to make people think very differently about what they can use as a spiritual tool, what things they can think about spiritually, how to actually build up a relationship with a spiritual entity that they choose in a realistic way that can actually help them get there. It's very building block. Like, so I think you could kind of set up like, first of all, don't narrow yourself with your deities. It doesn't have to be any of this shit. Really think about what matters to you specifically and what really calls to you, and then focus into that. That's like step one. Right. Step two is like, hey, here's some basics about, tarot cards. And like, but here's the reason you're doing that, because I want you to use this the way that to communicate with this deity, to help you build this relationship. Because one, it'll help you familiarize yourself with your deck really well and build up your energy for that. But also, it'll help you build faith and understanding and communication with a deity that you feel connected to. That right there is, I think, what is actually the core of your book. Okay. And everything else is just, here's a cool way to do that. But I think that is actually your book. Which is super cool because most people don't. Most people think, here's a chart of all my spells, and here's the alphabets I use, and here's all the stuff for the moons, and here's my... No, I think a book where...
It doesn't actually mean much to me.
It doesn't mean much to you because you've really put in the work for it. But I think that your strength with this book would be like, look, here's something fun that I do with my spirituality, but here's how I got here. Right. Like, you can do this too. And it doesn't have to be like this. It can be completely different. But like, I think really breaking down the step by step as far as, and not just the readings or how you do that, which is important for what you're doing, especially using the tarot to communicate with your deity, but specifically being like, how did I get here as far as like trying to use a tool to communicate with a deity? Because there's more than one you can use. Most people would use things like pendulums or Ouija boards or bones or whatever. Be like, why did you choose to use the tarot for that? I think would be helpful. Because most people wouldn't. Most people wouldn't. There's other stuff. You know, if I Googled right now, 5 tools to communicate with spirits, tarot cards probably wouldn't even pop up. They probably wouldn't even pop up. They'd be pretty far down on the list. Like,
for me, it was an accessibility.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody's got fucking tarot card decks, bro. There's a tarot deck for every weird, specific motherfucking thing out there. Like, and it's easy to find information about. It's not a closed practice. Anybody can do fucking tarot, and like, there's a million fucking interpretations for that shit. It's perfect for that. And like, I think using that was a really smart idea. And then it's fun, you know, and then it helps you, it's fun, you know, and it's like, but I definitely think kind of stressing in your book, like, hey, think about what you actually vibe with in that way. Right. Like, what do you actually connect with? And then kind of feel like you can make that a deity. You can deify that thing or that concept or that whatever, and you can just kind of, and then use this to communicate with, here's how I do this. But I think more important is getting people thinking about that process. Is like a different alternative to more personal spirituality. Right. I think that's the way to go.
Back to what you said before about the fluidity of fucking existence.
Yes.
And how that applies to everything.
Everything. Like, I would love to see like weird little cults pop up. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, it's weird. So in the studio, we have like this kind of like running gag, but it's kind of not a gag anymore, where we all pray to Saint Homobonus sometimes. And here's the thing.
It becomes real.
It becomes real. Like, he is a real saint. He's just such an obscure saint. He's like the saint of like merchants and artisans and shoemakers.
That's perfect.
Right? But like, we had to dig for that full. Like, that's not really, you know, and there's like other more obvious ones we could have done. But now it's become like a joke, right? And it's like, but we'll sit there and we talk to him. I'm like, oh, bro, like, it's just, you know, and it's funny because there is kind of a relationship there. And it's just like, and it's funny because we've all gotten in on it now. It's like, oh, great, now we're all doing it. But that's how it goes, you know. It's like, and that's why I look the Saint candles too. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna have this little Saint candle. It's got the picture of the guy. I'm just gonna talk to this fucker. It's like, making it real in your brain is like such a tool. Yes. Like, making it something you can, and that's why I think the tarot is great, because it's like a conversation you can have with it. Because there's so many fucking ways to interpret that shit, and like, you know.
I was talking to Aphrodite the other day, and she's like, I think we should get married. I'm like, is this because you think that's what I need, or is this because you're biased? And she's like, the star. I'm like, it's because you're biased.
It's because you're biased.
She's like, I'm biased.
Yep, I'm biased.
Okay. Within all of that, anything you want me to ask my dinosaur spirits? Because they're like feral. They're like so.
Okay, hold on.
Compared to others.
No, I love that dinosaur spirits are horny as fuck. That makes me so happy.
They're like, just give me the water.
Well, dude, who's even talking to them? Yeah, no, who's even talking to them?
Thirsty spirits, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god, I have something for you. Oh. You're gonna die. All right, hold on. Wait, am I attached to your computer?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I have the perfect thing.
Okay.
I knew I was saving this for somebody. Where is it? In here somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
It's a T-Rex pot.
I love it. I love it.
It's perfect. Right.
He's perfect. Oh yeah.
So there's my offering to your dinosaur altar there. It's so perfect. I think it's technically a candle holder.
I saw it and I'm like, I'm gonna put a candle in.
I think it's made out of concrete or something, but
it's like plaster.
Yeah.
And then whatever that
I don't know, just a piece of paint in there.
Yeah, always wonderful.
That's perfect.
I love it.
You're so cool. All right.
Thank you.
I'm so stoked I had that in there.
You have contributed to the book. You're an investor now.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to make an offering to the Dinosaur Pantheon. Like, that's like very exciting for me. I'm like, oh, if I could ask the dinosaurs anything. Oh man. Oh, I do be going through it right now.
That's the thing too. I don't know what they're.
I need to know if I need to wait it out with this guy or not. Be like, should I wait it out or I need to move on and do Hot Girl Summer? I need to know.
Okay, if you need to move on or stay.
Right. Should I wait it out or should I just cut my losses? Because my logical brain is I should just cut my fucking losses. But also, like, he's really good in the sack, so I'd really hate to walk away from that needlessly. So if the dinosaur gods could give me even a tiny bit of insight into that, I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'll ask him, like, give me yes or no.
Yes, give me yes or no. Like, yep.
Like,
should I walk away from that dude, dinosaurs? Okay. Should I walk away?
Alright. Yeah, I guess they would be very in tune with that primality.
No, I think so too, because that's really what's going on in that situation. It is definitely a primal situation, but you know, also just terrible. I'm very excited to get any sort of response from the deified dinosaurs. I just love the idea so much. Like, it's just so fun.
I will ask Mizzo.
Yes.
And the other one. I haven't talked to him at all yet.
Oh, that's so great.
With a lot of stuff, but yeah, I'll ask Mizzo and the other one.
I just love the idea. Like, it makes me think about that shit too, because I'm like, man, that is like, there's so much you could do. People are thinking, like, you know, that people always think of, like, even with, like, rocks. And people are like, oh, I have, like, you know, my crystal, my amethyst, and all. It's just like, there's so much weird, cool rocks out there. Like, literally, like, there's, like, incomprehensible rocks out there. Like, why does it always have to be just, like, the cool little witchcraft-friendly ones? It's like, there's, the pretty ones. They all like weird ones.
But, like, everybody picks a pocket rock.
Yeah, everybody picks a rock. I just have rocks, bro. I don't even care what they are. It's like this rock right here. I've literally stopped dead on the street and I'm like, and I'm gonna pick up this rock right here. That's mine now. I'm like that with all kinds of just ephemera, bro. Just like stupid bullshit. Like I be picking up dumb stuff all the time. Like I can't help it.
All right.
Weird shiny pebbles. Don't matter.
Okay, I think we've reached the end of those questions.
Cool.
My additional questions are: how would you like to be addressed in the book? Real name, alias?
Oh, you could just go by my real name. I don't care. I'm out and proud with this shit. Like, I've never had, like, I mean, it's weird. I do have, like, an initiate name, but I don't tell people that shit, so.
You don't have to.
I mean, I'm just go with the real name in there. You can do the Kinks in the middle if you want. I don't know if that'll give me any credibility. Like, you can just put my name in there.
Well, that was the other thing is, do you want me to, I mean, I absolutely was going to without asking you, but credit you in it as, like, Kelsy Kinks Wilson. Here's her Instagram.
That would be super cool. Like, I'd appreciate that. Like, you certainly don't have to.
Shout out.
Yeah, totally. I feel like I have to do some, like, dinosaur art. Like a little dinosaur, like, fucking, like, with a folk art.
Listen, if you do dinosaur art, I will put it in.
Oh my god, I have to come up with something. Like, I have to come up with something, like, some cool dinosaur spirituality piece. Like, it's just so fucking fun, bro. Like, it's so fun. I love the idea so hard.
Because not just that, but with the interview I did with my family friend recently, she's a rock hound. And
nice.
She decided to go by Mama Wolf. She goes out into BLM, like government land, and does those dinosaur digs.
That's cool. You know what's funny? So, like, I even think that too could, like, be like such a broad expression of spirituality. Because my sister, she
does so much wishy shit. She's very Christian, but she does so much.
Dude, that's how my fucking sister Rosemary is. Like, because she grew up with, like, the Christianity shit, but she's like, man, I just feel so at peace when I'm out here digging for rocks. I'm like, witch, fucking, like.
She was showing me her crystals. They were talking about. They grow.
Dude, people have. I think people innately have a need to fill a spiritual need. Mm-hmm. I don't think people understand that feeling. I think some people, if they grow up with religion, they sometimes have, like, kind of a sense of it. But until you really have, like, a spiritual experience, or you take the work to connect to that, mm-hmm. you kind of spend a lot of time filling or chasing what would feel that feeling, and you don't really know what it is. And it's not always religious stuff. No. I mean, I definitely get a lot of that. You know, it's weird, not through my art, but, like, specifically through, like, textile shit. Like, when I'm weaving or knitting or crocheting. To me, that's, like, a very spiritual practice. Like, it's meditative. It's, like, I don't know, it's like, I feel all in touch with my ancestors when I do that shit, all in touch with my femininity when I do that shit. It's just a very, like, primal thing, honestly. Like, sit there and, like, I'm gonna make something with my bare hands to keep this fool warm. Like, I don't know, it's just, like, a very primal thing. Like, And I feel the same way about, like, you know, people who, like, dig for rocks or, like, go hiking all sick or fucking make crazy shit with their hands. There's just something about it, bro.
It's like one of my most favorite things to do. Somebody asked me this, and the first thing that comes to mind was this. I went camping, and I had to make a campfire.
Have to.
On it every night.
Have to.
That
You just have to.
my
It's just like...
spirit, my body.
Literally.
Every night.
Like, even with this place, you know, like, I'll clean it periodically and, like, you know, be sweeping the floors and open the doors up. It's like... Something about, like, it's just that, like, even the other day I was hanging out with my friend Carlos and he was just, like, cleaning his house up and doing the laundry and, like, but he was, like, in a really good mood doing it, but I'm like, that guy trapped into it there. It's like, something about it's like maintaining your home and, like, maintaining yourself. It's like, yes, it can be very spiritual, bro, and, like, I think people misinterpret it a lot.
Yeah.
And, like, I think if they could really look at it as a spiritual thing, they could probably get more out of it, honestly.
Probably, yeah. But I was going to say, in the pages I did with the family friend, I also did like a little character version of her, but I made her a wolf with braids and like a big sun hat. Any elements that you want in your character design?
Oh man, I definitely got to have my little beat nose. And I always wear black all the time, so it's probably got to be all... That's funny, every time I ever draw, I always look all grumpy, I'm all serious, like... I don't know, man. I'm just a goofy chick. Like, I don't know. You can do all with my serious fucking... I was thinking myself as, like, a really pissed off chibi character. I don't know why. With, like, a hat on, a little beanie, all my little glasses. All.
I would have thought that you would have wanted some of, like, the bondage stuff from your art.
Not necessarily, but, like, me, myself, personally, like, I'm so fucking... Like, I'm just, like, a weird chick. I would say, like, if anything, just make sure I got, you know, my crazy glasses. Yeah. And... Maybe some yarn shit, just like big old yarn ball on my shirt or something, or fucking just always sitting there. I don't know, like, I don't know, bro. I'm totally open to it. Whatever. Like, I think you got a general vibe of what I'm like. Nothing's gonna like piss me off. I'm really like, cool. I'd be very interested to see what you come up with. Like, I'm sure it'll be great.
Okay, awesome.
I'm sure it'll be better than most shit I would come up with. I'd be like, because I don't really like think about myself like that. Like, it's hard. Yeah, it is hard to do yourself.
I can't draw myself.
It's hard. I can, but I can draw myself like, you know, cute little weird, like, all pissed off. It's because I got resting bitch face all 6 months. Like,
most people do.
Yeah. Some people either have resting bitch face or they just look fucking dumb when they're sitting there. Like, I'm like, you either look seriously in thought or like nothing's going on. There's no middle ground.
Smooth brain.
Smooth brain. Tiny vibes. Small boy, only thoughts.
Only vibes.
Only vibes, no problems.
All right, I think that's all of my questions.
All right, well, fuck yeah, dude. That's great. I'm super stoked for your book. I think it'll be super fun.
Thank you for being so willing and contributing. And
yes, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I have this in here. I'm so stoked.
All right. Thank you very much.
Stoked. I'm very excited for you.
And that's the end of the interview.
I think that's fucking rad, bro.